Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back into the SFS channel. My name is Gavin, and today I've got 5 wide receivers to stay clear of when setting your fantasy lineups this week. These are players, tough matchups, brutal opposing cornerbacks, bad team situations and usages over the past few weeks now. Whatever the case might be, I have very, very strong reasons for concern this week, and I am not, again, looking to put these players in either wide receiver 2 or flex lineup positions for basically every situation out there. There might be a couple of exceptions, but you can drop your questions and your situations for your leagues down in the comment section below. So before we get started, drop down, give today's episode a like, and click the subscribe button if you're new around here. We're keeping this SFS community growing, and we're trying to help out as many of you as possible this NFL season. We're having a great time while doing it, and hopefully winning a lot of fantasy matchups on a weekly basis. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Let's hit the intro and get straight into our first must-sit receiver. Here we go. So poor Julio Jones here. This one, it saddens me every time I talk about Julio this NFL season because I really haven't had much nice things to say about him. Now, I love Julio Jones, the player. I love what he has done throughout his career. But man, the first half of this season has been a nightmare for fantasy owners that drafted Julio Jones in the first 3 rounds of their 10 or 12 team leagues. That's right around where his ADP was sandwiched in earlier on this summer. But holy cow, I mean, he only has 1 game with 15 points this season against Seattle, and everything outside of that has been a very, very disappointing show. This past week, I had some hope that he could salvage his season and rise up from the ashes. Working against Los Angeles' number 2 cornerback, we've seen players have very, very impressive games. Whoever Jalen Ramsey isn't covering, basically, has been able to, in most cases, if they're a quality player, separate, score fantasy points, and have productive outings. That's something we figured out pretty quick this year, is that the helping pieces around Ramsey in the secondary aren't quite living up to expectations or even their production levels from 2020. So something I thought hopefully could jumpstart a Julio Jones second half of the season comeback here. The window is still open for that. So for those of you who've been asking, should I drop Julio Jones? The answer for now is still no. If you can hold out for longer now, if you could trade him, that'd be awesome. But his stock is just beyond bottomed out at this point, and you're not going to be able to get a bag of Cheetos for him. Julio Jones is someone I'm still rostering because he is still talented. He did catch 4 of his 4 targets last week. The Titans were front running and didn't have much incentive to push the ball downfield, so that is some context I'll put into last week's disappointing performance. But the road doesn't get any easier here for him against the Saints this week. This is a team now that, while they don't have 2 absolute shutdown corners, they do have Marshawn Lattimore, but this is a team that defensively overall is very well coached, very well organized. They are always in the right situations to make the best football play. This Saints defense is something to watch. I thought they'd take a huge step off a cliff after all the personnel they lost last year, but now we're seeing how important the structure and system is for this team because of how they've turned around and replicated their success with a largely new group of players. So Julio Jones against the Tennessee Titans, Julio Jones against the New Orleans Saints. He plays for the Tennessee Titans, in case you haven't picked that up by now. This week is not a good matchup. If you're looking at the Saints in terms of what their number 1 strength is, despite the fact that I respect them widely at all levels of team defense, they are a dominant run-stopping force. To me, that means that they are going to make the Titans even more increasingly so than last week, one-dimensional, and they're going to force them to pass the football. But when you're forcing a team to pass the football, you can pin your ears back, get after the passer, and Ryan Tannehill has been sacked a ton of times this year, so that's not something I feel too great about. The Titans are already at a disadvantage without Derrick Henry. You've got Adrian Peterson, McNichols, Deontay Foreman trying to make up that gap. They didn't get the job done last week, and frankly, I don't expect them to be able to live up to that hype for the rest of this year. So a tough matchup. They're going to shut down the Titans' run game, make Tannehill drop back and pass. The play-action game should not be too effective in this matchup. That is not something that bodes well for a speedy deep threat like Julio Jones here. Corey Davis returning off of injury. This is going to follow the rule we have here at SFS. I'm staying away from players in their first game back from an injury, especially when it has cost them multiple games. Corey Davis is a player who I really like as a talent. I really like his ability to separate and produce. But this isn't the week that he's going to do that, or at least that's not how I see it here for Week 10. The Buffalo Bills have been one of the stingiest matchups for opposing wide receiver ones on teams. A.J. Brown, I believe, is one of the most successful players as of late against Tre'Davious White, who has been the monster destroying our fantasy wide receivers games. He's most likely going to be matching up against Corey Davis. Now, theoretically, Corey Davis has not been ruled into this matchup yet, but Robert Saleh did say he expects Corey to be back for this matchup, and I expect him to be treated as the number one threat in this passing game. So Corey Davis should help this Jets team as a whole, but this week I think that in the fantasy department, the stats will be lower. Tre'Davious White's going to do a number on him. Not someone I'm looking to start, although I am excited about his return because I think long-term this season he can have lineup implications for teams. Next up here, Jarvis Landry of the Cleveland Browns. No more OBJ in Cleveland. That's big news. That means that for most people at face value, we've got Jarvis Landry's arrow pointing upwards, and I would like to agree with you. I think he's a very capable player of separating, a very underrated receiver in terms of at least what in the past he has done from a floor level perspective in fantasy lineups. But, going back, just want to make a quick note here. As a Green Bay Packer fan at the time of recording this video, late on Tuesday evening, OBJ has not picked a team yet. I would absolutely love it if you'd want to come over here to Old Chili, Wisconsin, sign with my Packers, and have AR-12 dot you up with some deep balls. Hopefully get a ring together. We'll see. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But besides the point, Jarvis Landry now the lone dog, or at least the clear dog at the top of the mountain for this Browns depth chart at the wide receiver position. Jarvis against the Pats this week is not a matchup I like, though. Something that we've seen Baker transition into this year from years past is that he is really liking the tight ends this year, and that's meaning Austin Hooper and David Njoku are getting lots of red zone opportunities, and they're also getting lots of just targets in general as a collective tight end core. Now, that doesn't mean Jarvis Landry can't be productive, but when you're a run-first team, you don't pass the ball overly that much as it starts off with here, and then you're already diluting those targets to other players. Doesn't leave Jarvis with too much to work with. So, hey, that might have been part of the reason OBJ wants out. But besides the point, again, into New England this week, J.C. Jackson is quickly becoming one of the game's top corners. I've loved him for a couple of years now. When he played opposite of Stephon Gilmore, it was clear he was a talented player. But in the absence of Gilmore, he is still shutting players down, getting interceptions, and just being a clutch player for this Pats defense, which, by the way, at all three levels is very, very solid. So you're going to get a Pats defense this week that I expect to, Bill Belichickism here, they're going to take away the team's top asset and make them play left-handed. That means Nick Chubb, Dearness Johnson, whoever the lead back is this week, because Nick Chubb has COVID right now. He's got to get 2 negative tests 2 days in a row. He's a vaccinated player. He's got to get cleared for that game if he's going to play because he, again, tested positive for COVID, so he might be out. Regardless, the Browns are going to try and run the football with whoever the lead back is there. That means Bill Belichick's going to take that away. He is not going to let the Browns run the ball, or at least as effectively as they want to, and that means that they are going to force Baker to throw, and I think that that's going to force him into some costly errors here. J.C. Jackson, again, is a nightmare at the cornerback position, locking up opposing wide receivers this season. And the secondary in general is something that's always well coached from the Patriots, always has very productive seasons, and always does their job on any given Sunday. So I'm not too confident in Jarvis Landry this week. I think the ceiling is already low as it is because of who the Browns are as a team and as an offense. And that floor, not something I'm feeling great about because of the situation we've seen with the tight ends this year, in addition to, again, the fact that you've got a tough secondary matchup. Courtland Sutton against the Philadelphia Eagles is another player I'm looking to stay clear of. He's not that I want to compare his game to Mike Williams, but we did see Darius Slay play very good football against another larger framed athlete at the wide receiver position, that being Mike Williams, again in Week 9. Mike did beat him for a 49-yard deep route, and deep vertical passing game isn't necessarily Courtland Sutton's strength. He's more of a red zone target, more of a player who wins at the point of attack. Now, that is very much a part of Mike Williams' game, but he's a little bit more utilized as a deep vertical passing asset than a Courtland Sutton is here. And that's for a couple of reasons. We'll get into that in a second. But namely being that Teddy Bridgewater is not a player who wants to air the football out. He wants to make smart, intelligent football decisions. and he's just not the arm talent that Justin Herbert is. He doesn't have the ability to place the ball in the breadbasket, thread the needle like Herbert does, or have the cannon of an arm that Justin Herbert does have to push that ball downfield to Mike Williams. So Courtland against Darius Slay this week. It's a tough matchup. You're talking about a team that, to begin with, is already more so of a run-first team. Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon see a high total touch load on a weekly basis, and they split that backfield just about dang near down the middle as it gets. This is not a situation I like. I think the upside is very capped. We've seen Tim Patrick also step up here in the recent weeks and be a lot more of a factor in this passing offense than I think a lot of us would have expected. And now we've got Jerry Jeudy back as well, potentially Noah Fant coming off the COVID list this week. Too many options in the passing game, too difficult of a matchup. Again, low ceiling, low floor, shaky matchup here. I think that there's a higher chance we see Sutton bust again here in week 10. And then lastly here, Christian Kirk. One quick note on Christian Kirk. How about this guy? Wide receiver 18 here at the midway point of this NFL season. He's done a great job stretching the field for this Cardinals offense. Him and Kyler Murray have been hooking up in the end zone for touchdowns. He's been making big catches. And last week, notably, in the absence of DeAndre Hopkins against the 49ers defense, catches 6 of his 6 targets and 91 yards. So this guy can get the job done without A.J. Green on the field as well. So he was the clear top option in this offense. I don't think we're ready there to say that with Rondale Moore yet without those other guys out there. Christian Kirk was the man. He produced, got almost 100 yards receiving. Impressive numbers from him. This week, though, with the potential looming return of Kyler Murray, after what I saw last week, and in general, given my rule about players coming off of weeks or injuries that have forced them to miss games, we went back to Corey Davis, talked about that a little bit earlier. You see how Dak Prescott, you see how Tyrod Taylor came back and were rusty and weren't the players that we usually expect them to be. Now, Tyrod Taylor's not an elite quarterback. He's not exactly the guy who's going to throw the football all over the yard, but he was still pretty bad in that game, even for his standards, which I'm a Tyrod fan, so that's saying something here. I like Tyrod Taylor. He's a fun player to watch. Not a great fantasy asset, not a franchise quarterback, but I like to root for the guy. Christian Kirk, this week against Carolina, a tough secondary matchup, maybe a quarterback coming off of an injury that's going to keep him less mobile and confined to the space of the pocket. This just stacks up to situations that I think become less and less favorable. You also talk about maybe D-Hop reintroduces himself to this offense, and you see Christian Kirk start to fall down the pecking order here. Maybe A.J. Green comes off the COVID list, and now just like that, he's the wide receiver 3 or kind of skimming that line of being the foggy wide receiver 2. Is it Green? Is it Kirk? That line is really tough to draw. But at the very best, you're talking about the wide receiver 2 in this offense with a tough matchup with an injured quarterback. And if not, Colt McCoy showed he can get the job done, but this still isn't something I'm super excited with. The Panthers secondary has a laundry list of names at the cornerback position that can play legitimate, respectable defense. You've got Gilmore. Now, Gilmore is going to go over, guard DeAndre Hopkins if that is the situation that Hopkins is healthy and able to go. You've got Boye. You've got Dante Jackson. You've got C.J. Henderson. They go 4 deep at the cornerback position in Carolina. It's one of the deepest secondary units in the league. We've talked about this week after week here on the channel. They're a tougher matchup than we give them credit for. So, Christian Kirk, he's not a volume play. We don't see him get a ton of passes thrown his way every week. He's explosive. He stretches the field. He scores touchdowns. This is not a matchup I like him to do that. And again, if Kyler Murray comes in here with a partially recovered ankle, he's probably, chances are, if he plays, going to be less than 100% because it was a significant 1 to 3 weeks ankle sprain. He's going to not be running around as much. He's going to be less mobile to be able to break the tackle box, get outside the pocket, make those incredible off-balance throws we see him make. And I think that the overall ceiling of this offense might be a little bit lower. If I'm a Cardinals fan, I might, and this could be considered a sizzling hot take, I might be more hopeful and think the team as a whole would be better off to just see Kyler's ankle through, get healthy back to 100% after seeing how Sam Darnold played the past few games with his reckless nature, with what your defense can be in Arizona, and with seeing Colt McCoy's level of competence running this offense. I might just want to throw him out there another week and let Kyler get right. We'll see what happens later in the week because that is still up for debate. That's still yet to be decided here. But Kirk's situation fantasy-wise is not something I think is the most intriguing here for me in Week 10. There you have it. Those were our 5 must-sit wide receivers for Week 10 fantasy football. If you enjoyed today's episode, drop down and leave it with a like. We're posting fantasy content and episodes dang near every day of the week, Monday through Friday, and sometimes when we're feeling a little wild, we might just throw a Saturday episode at you, so stay tuned for those as always. But with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Go check out some of the cool links we've got in the description of today's episode, a free community Discord server to jump in and interact with other members of the SFS channel. We've got merchandise, which we have not been wearing as much as we should in videos here. Unfortunately, I think the green screen we've got going on might actually make us transparent if we were to wear that. But go check that out. That's on our website, stillfantasy.com. Or go check out SFS Gold, which is our exclusive membership service here on the channel. Just over $1 a week, we'll set your lineups for you, get you our weekly positional rankings for half PPR scoring, and get you access to our DMs on our community Discord server, which you can ask away all of your questions 24/7. So thank you guys so much for watching, supporting the content. As always, we will see you guys next time. Peace out.